Hi, Zanzibar here to show you how to make a serger in World of Warcraft player housing. I wanted to make a serger to go with my sewing machine. You don't necessarily need a serger, but it's a great finishing tool. However, this one is much more complicated than the sewing machine. So at the time of the construction, what you're looking at right now, it is 120 decor to build the serger. That's quite a lot. Most of it is spent on just the white part. However, what's cool about it is that it moves. The threads at the top, they are all moving, and then the foot looks like it's working. It's doing some work. I want to make it look as real as possible, so I'm going to show you how to put it together. So first things first. We gotta move this desk out of the way. This is what we got going on. So the first thing I started off with was I just needed to make the base. So we have 16 platforms, Silver Moonbeam platforms. They're from the housing vendor. I just scaled them down to 20% and arranged them in a variety of ways. So we have the first one. And then the second one that I made was this one right here. And I just put it like that. Then I needed to make the top, so I did one more and another one. These are all 90-degree angles and they're all size 20. Then I needed to make it a little thicker, so I got another pair and just added them to the sides, just up here on the top. Then I needed to extend it, so I added more beam platforms just to extend it. As you can see here, got one, we got two, and we got three. So when we put those all into place, we got the front of the machine. Then I needed to extend this part, so I took one platform beam, I scaled it to 30%, and I just turned it up and just put it into place. Nothing too much, just a lot of putting stuff together. So we'll go ahead and put some of these back. So then I have these four up here, including this one. However, there's a little gap in between them, so it looks like what a serger does, where the thread goes in it. So I just scaled these to 20%, turned them up, right side up, and then I just slid them into place. You could do that, but you pull it just a little bit away, and it looks like that there's like a line spot. We'll put this one right there, and then that's what you got going on. Since this machine's a little fat, we gotta make this part. This part is mostly just to cover this mechanisms that I got going on back here. So I scaled these to 50%. I turned them right side up, and I just scaled them just enough to where they cover this final beam, and they cover all the junk and all the baskets, everything that's going on up here. Next, I'll talk about the buttons. The buttons right here, or I guess the scroll wheels. They are all elegant seat cushions. They're from the housing vendors. I dyed these highborn marble. And then I have another one right here that's in just a little bit more. And I dyed this one yellow, and then, red, green, and blue. So I tuck it in. I turned them 90 degrees and I scaled them to 20%, the smallest they can go. And then I just put them over them, and then it looks like a scroll wheel. So I repeated the process for each of these. And then where the line is, I wanted to make sure these matched up. So just put these as close as you can to the line. We're going to go to the next area. This is the catcher. It's like a little bin that catches all of the fabric that would get cut off down into here. I have some fabric strips. I just used some plants. So for this back part right here, we have a standing ornate weapon rack. It's from the housing vendor. I have this turned 40% and I have it turned 180 degrees. And then I dyed it to match this, and then I just slid it into place. It's just to like kind of look like there's a bend. If you don't want this, you can just not have it and it just looks like that. But I wanted it. And then the bend is a Caldor wash basin. This is from Legion, the Dreamweavers. It's to be revered to buy this. This is quite a popular item for the kitchen, but I used it for my catching bin. So I scaled it to 40%. And I just put it up and clipped it in there until it looked like it was good. And then that's my little catch basin. Now we'll move on to this area, which is the foot. And I have the same thing as my sewing machine. I have little wooden mugs. They are from Garrison Vendor in the inn specifically. And they're scaled to 20%. And I have them turned at an angle to where the handle faces up. And then you just flip them down into there. Now the base of this, I used this, which is a earthen storage crate. I turned it upside down. This is from the Panda quest guy. I think this is the first quest that he gave you for housing. So I scaled this to 20%, turned it upside down, and clipped it into there, and then adjusted it to where I want it to be. You want this white part from this beam that I should show. It's a beam at 20% and at 30% angle. You want it to be up just a little bit, because when you're cutting your stuff, it needs to catch and then get sit into here. So that's that part. And then I have my thread. This, instead of being a Caldor glaive like my sewing machine, it is just a Westfall woven basket. It's from the house vendor. I scaled it to 20% and you just put it in there. Now for this part, which is the foot, which I thought was quite cool, instead of replicating like with a needle, I wanted to make this like thick, because it's like a cutting thing. So this is actually a spring-powered pointer. It is from the Venture Company in Undermine. You have to be revered with them. And it costs, I think, resonance crystals. I thought this was quite cool because it's moving and it adds to the illusion that this is a working machine. So I scaled this to, let's see, 20%, and I just turned it facing up so that's facing that way, and I just clipped it in there. Otherwise you can use this needle combo right here, but you know, or you can actually use probably a bench or something. So then there's this like piece on the side, which is like where the thread would come down and like loop through. Usually it's up here, but I put it down here. Just to add to the illusion. It is a smoke lamp. It is from Cataclysm Crafting Jewel Crafting. It's set to 30%, and I just rotated it slightly. I rotated it at 180 degrees, but then also slightly angled so that this point is pointing up so that you can hide this part. And then I just slid it into place. It can go on either side. I mean, you could put it on top, but it's not gonna work because it's gonna show through. So I stuck it on but it kind of adds to the illusion. Okay, next we're going to go to the side. These are our thread knobs. There's 3 of them on this machine. So these are just open, elegant elven barrels. I dyed them bone white. And this one is bigger, so it's 40%, and I clipped it on in there. And then there's 2 more, and they are both 20%, and I just kind of angled them a little bit so they look off-centered. And I just also clipped them into the side. So these are what you would turn to adjust your threads. Next, we needed to add our light. So I have behind this beam, 2 lights. I wanted 2 lights this time. I just felt like it needed more lights. So I have one set to 20 and I have another one set to 50. This one's facing up and the other one is facing that way. And I just slid it up in here. And then I just, covered the beam. And then this object right here is just a elegant chair. You don't need this. Some sewing machines have a cutter that cuts the thread on the side. So I just added that because it appealed to me. Next, we're going to the top part. This is the bobbin area. This is where all the thread gets fed into your machine. This one was the most difficult to figure out how to do, but I think I did a pretty good job. So we'll start off with this T-beam. So the T-beam, I was struggling to find something that would work, but I ended up going out with this Ghanaian wall shelf. I scaled it to 20% and I turned it so that these are facing this way. And then I just put it up here. So then we have the pole. The pole is a Ghanaian pitchfork. You don't really have to do much with this. It just goes into the middle of the T-beam. Next, we needed some thread, like going from these. So I replicated like my sewing machine. I just used arden wheeled hanging baskets. I scaled them to the smallest they could go, 20%. And you can make them straight up and down. However, they slightly show out the sides of these machines. So I angled these two sides. I angled them slightly. Oh, just very so slightly angled. And then I slipped them right under so that they're just right under the beam, but also that they clip into this part of the Ghanaian shelf. So it looks like they're going through some kind of foldy thing. So I repeated that, saying they're all 20% and there's 4 of them here. There's also one here. You don't have to have this one here, but there's one more hanging basket in here, just like my sewing machine, just as the thread being fed. Next, we have the thread itself. I decided to just go with these open, elegant elven barrels. There's 4 of them here. I made them 20% and I spaced them out so that they were just, you know, kind of even with these baskets. And then I dyed them like a gray color so that they, I guess, kind of match the thread going being fed up and into the machine. And then I also dyed the bottom bone white and I just stuck them on here. They're also sitting on a platform slightly. It is a sturdy wooden bench. It's exactly this item right here on the sewing machine. I just put this on for added effect. We have the top of the thread, which is $1 posts. These are crafting. Here's their From Northrend inscription. And I just scaled them to 20%, turned them upside down, just like my sewing machine, and put them in the middle of the barrels. And then for my threads that are moving, I have these. These are hanging paper lanterns. These are from Pandaria Crafting. Inscription, scaled them to 20% and turned them upside down. And then I angled them 15%. And then I put them in place like this. The goal was for them to be kind of pointing to where this line would be. And since they move, it kind of looks like it's working. It's not perfect, but just angle them to where they look like they're going to this. And I kind of clipped them into these hooks right here and then into the shelf so that it kind of adds to the illusion. So yeah, that's the serger. If you would like to see these 2 accessories I have over here, I will actually show them now. So I have a pair of scissors, which is also essential item for any tailor or cosplayer, and a laptop, because, you know, when you're sitting here working away at your project, you gotta have some entertainment. So we'll start off with the scissors. They aren't actually that hard. It's more just adjustment of the angles of items to get this like shape. So we'll start off with the scissor part, which is one of those wooden mugs from the Garrison. And I scaled this to 50%. However, I had to angle it weird. So like you can make it where it's straight. So like that's straight. And then I just started turning it sideways until it kind of looked like, and then go up and down until that part kind of looks sharp. And then it kind of looks like, you know, a scissor, like the big part of the scissor. And then this other part of the scissor, the smaller part, is actually a fruit bowl. And I left this at 100%. And I just turned it sideways and then clipped it in to the ground until I was happy with how it looked as far as looking like scissors. Next, we have this handlebar right here. It is 2 more wooden mugs. Nothing special. They're just 20% turned up so that the handle is facing up and then clipped into the ground. Same thing with this. Next, we have the handlebars. These were a little difficult to figure out what to do, but eventually I found something that worked quite well. So this is the demonic storage chest. This is from Legion Remix. At the time of this video, you purchase this with bronze. I do not know what you can purchase them with in the future, but this is 5,000 bronze, and you have to have the Legion Fall campaign finished. I turned these like straight up, and then I slightly angled it so that, because I wanted this part. So it's angled to like 87, and I have it set to 50%. And I just put it down until it matched up with the handlebar of my scissor. And then I repeated it on the other side to get the same thing on this side of that's my scissors. Next up is the laptop. The laptop's also pretty easy to make, just more angling of things. So this part is the Sunrise Canyon painting. It's scaled to 30%, and it's kind of just angled backwards-ish to look like a laptop. And then the bottom is also the sunrise painting. It's just turned upside down so that this is the bottom. And then behind it, I have a window, which is going to be a little difficult. And I have this scaled to 25%. And very carefully, you clip it in there until you're happy with it. And it lights up the screen. There we go. Good. Yeah, like it makes it look like it's lit up. Then I got all my keycaps here. This is just like my buttons on my sewing machine. They are elegant benches of them total here. And they're all dyed a purple color because if I made them black, they matched with this. So I made these all 20%, and the first ones are clipped in the back here, behind it, like that. And then I clipped them down into the ground and adjusted them. And then as you can see, there's another pair in the front here, which I angled just so slightly, about 187. And then I put it into the ground, and I matched these little ones with these ones up here so that it looks like, you know, there's only that many rows because there was no room to fit more. And then my magnificently high quality looking space bar is this, an elaborate Suramar window. This is from Legion Vendor. You have to be pretty far into the Night Fallen campaign to get this, but I'm using this part. It's also angled slightly, 267, so just so slightly that way. And then it's at 20%. And I clip it on in there. You can, if you want, get another one of these windows and make your keyboard light up, but it was just a little bit too much. And then to hide my benches, I just put some books back here. And then there's this little pud cushion, one of those cushions. And then my needles are Gildan pitchfork. Just clip down till it looks like I got some needles going on. And then the final item we have is another foot press. Same thing as my sewing machine. I have a Valdraken candelabra. This is from the Panda Guy second chair Powdo. Just made this 20% and I angled it like 60 some percent. And then I clip it into place. And then my foot press is just a silver moonbeam platform, and it is 68 degrees. And I just clip it into the ground slightly at an angle. And then my final thing, if you're interested, which is like a cutting board looking thing. Some people also use this as like a keyboard. It is the ornate iron forge table. And I just clipped it down. Also to hide some of my stuff that I got going down here. Just to look like I have a cutting board of some sorts. That's my tutorial for my serger. I wanted to challenge myself to make something more complicated than my sewing machine, and I think I achieved that. If you'd like more information or just want to let me know if you liked it or not, leave a comment, like and subscribe if you would like. I hope you all have a good one. Goodbye.